Siegfried Lukatis is a recently retired professor of book studies at the University of Leipzig. He researches and publishes on the history of German books, book selling, and publishing in the 20th century. And he has built a lovely little library, playroom, really, at Leipzig called Bibliotop. Could you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Well, it's
and welcome to the Bibliophile.
The Bibliotop is something like a mixture of a library, an archive, and a museum. We like to show it to anyone, and however we study there the history of books, are very proud to show our selection of books.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I had the pleasure of seeing the place, and in it there's a fine collection of books, a series of books called Insel Bucherei.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that series of books is?
Well, it's as we say in Germany, it's most beautiful series of books, very old, 112 years. From 1912 was founded, and there are about 2,000 numbers. Well, not numbers, there are only something like 1,900 numbers, but sometimes you have 3 books on the same number. It depends on the strange German history.
Yes, part of that is explained by the division of Germany into 2 parts, correct?
That's one reason. And then, of course, sometimes a book was forbidden and exchanged, or they made a book during the First World War. Let me give an example. There's number 165, and in First World War they make something like the fight at Antwerpen. After World War I, it was exchanged, and they gave this number to Stefan Zweig. Stefan Zweig had founded this Insel Bucherei, and
he was the co-creator, isn't he?
Yeah, he was the creator. He had the idea, but he was Jewish, and that's why his book was put out of the numbering in 1936, and they got another book. I believe it's about Michelangelo. Of course, after 1945, they had to put it back. And in Eastern Germany, they gave another book to the number than in Western Germany, because Stefan Zweig, he was in the first years of communism not welcome in Eastern Germany, because he had another idea of how making history without laws and so on, and so they had to put him away. And that's the reason there were 5 books on the same number, 165. And if you have this phenomenon, of course, it is quite clear that there should be more books than just 1,900.
Okay. Zweig, he committed suicide, and he was in South America, right?
Yeah, in 1941 in Brazil.
Yeah. He was the founder, or it was his idea to, it was his idea along with Anton Kippenberg.
Yeah, Anton Kippenberg.
Tell me about Kippenberg.
Well, he was the new chief of this publishing house since 1909. Came from Bremen in northern Germany. Well, and he's a legend. And his house was 100 meters from here away in Leipzig, destroyed during the war. And he was a great fan of Goethe. He was famous for many thousands books and strips and manuscripts of Goethe. And there's a museum for him and so on. And he had not the idea, but you see, it will take very much power to make such a book series about 50, 60 years, every year 12, 20 books, and however it did work.
The actual publishing house, Insel started off as a journal, and here's a book that I have by Siegfried Lukatis, the author and his publisher. I'm just going to quote from that about the name Insel, which means in English island. Here's what the editor said in the first issue of that journal. By giving our publication the name Die Insel, we merely wanted to make clear how little we are inclined to join in the cries of triumph, now so prevalent, over the glorious results of any and all modern artistic efforts, and how very conscious we are of the imminent internal and external difficulties standing in the way of a desirable development of our artistic life.
Yeah.
So in other words, what? Focusing in on great works as opposed to current works?
Yeah, you can say so. However, when they started, the most famous authors were still alive. Rainer Maria Rilke, and Hugo von Hofmannsthal, and Stefan Zweig, and so on. Well, it was a living publishing house with living authors. Now, more or less, it is a classical.
Yes.
They are all dead since many years, and during the 20s and 30s, there were not so many authors living. For example, when Richard Wagner died, when he was 50 years dead,
yes,
they made a series with all the books of and all operas of Richard Wagner, because they had not to sell any honoraries. It depends on our copyright system. 50 years after death.
So was that included in the Insel Bucherei series?
Yeah.
The libretto.
It should be 30 years.
30 years. So this is what Klippenberg did. He basically, as soon as the copyright expired, he published the librettos to Wagner's operas in the series, correct?
Yeah. But however, it's easier for people to take the books from Reclam. They have not this hardcover, and you can read it during hearing the music.
Okay, so Reclam is another series. It's cheaper. It's not so well made. Is that right? Yeah. And it's paperback.
Yeah, it's paperback.
And right. That's an Eastern German series, right?
Eastern Germany, it's very old. It's from 1867.
1867, okay. And they don't pay so much attention to the design and production values. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And Reclam, it's still going?
Yeah. It's still alive. Of course, Richard Wagner was not living, but 30 years dead, and it wasn't no longer necessary to pay something for him. And they made all of his operas and all the books of Richard Wagner when he was 30 years dead. And however, it was impossible to sell it, because the books of Reclam, you could take them to opera, and you should never take a book of Insel to the opera. It's impossible to use it there with the hardcover.
Why is it impossible? They're small books.
They're small, but it's easier with Reclam books. With paperback, and of course you use it 1 or 2 times, then it will be destroyed, but it's another type of book. And I don't know why I could use Insel books in opera too, but however, I never tried.
And so it wasn't a success then for Insel. Okay. Here's another quote. I want to quote, and this is Klippenberg in a letter he wrote to Hugo von Hofmannsthal. Kippenberg. Did I say Klippenberg? He wrote this in 1906. He said, this is what he thought Insel was about, Insel Verlag.
Yeah.
He said it was to serve world literature in the Goethean sense. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, it has in any way an international character. There are from the beginning on very interesting Russian authors, for example, Turgenev. You will find Dostoevsky, of course.
Chekhov.
Yeah, Chekhov, and you will find the French authors, English authors, Dylan Thomas, I remember, and Virginia Woolf, all those.
Eliot, yeah.
Yeah, from everywhere.
Okay.
Another publishing house in Germany, very, let's say, they were more international, the Fischer Verlag.
Okay. Well, we'll save that for our next conversation.
Yeah.
Here continues Kippenberg. He said, in the Goethean sense, to adapt the form of a book to its content, to cultivate increasingly an appreciation of the art of the book and its refinements, and to publish only a small part of contemporary literature, but if possible, the part that promises to endure. Anyway, the first book in the Insel series, Bucherei series, is by Rilke.
Yeah, Die Weise von Liebe und Tod, the song of Love and Death, the cornet, number one. It was famous, very famous during the First World War, and they said there were two books the German soldiers took with them, Goethe, of course, Faust, im Rucksack, or Rilke, Die Weise von Liebe und Tod. It's a romantic story about a young officer on his horse, cavalry, and so on.
Okay. So really, this series has brought the world to Germany.
Yeah, you can say so.
What about the translation? Like, who did they commission translators for this work, or did they take stuff that had already been translated into German?
Well, they had very famous translators. Sometimes for lyrics, they asked Rainer Maria Rilke and Hofmannsthal, and I think the same level would be on prosa fiction.
So yeah. Kippenberg commissioned it. The thing that's most striking about these books is the beautiful patterned paper. Yeah, they're just stunning.
Yeah, it's something like ornament, and still now there are different schools. For example, in Eastern Germany, they preferred the ornament, and in Western Germany, they took pictures and photographs. However, if we speak about the history of Insel Bucherei, we take both traditions and like both traditions, but for a passionate friend of Insel books, it is terrible how they made the design in Western Germany, but there was a market, and in Eastern Germany it was another thing. They were very, very cheap, 1 mark 20, and they made 20,000 copies of it. In Western Germany, it was more expensive, and 8 or 9 D-marks, and they did not print more than 2,000 of them. That means nowadays, the books made in Western Germany are rare, more expensive. You have to pay 70, 100 euro sometimes, and the books of Eastern Germany, however, we would prefer them.
Because what? They're better made?
Well, they have ornaments. They were made by artists. They have a special style, a very traditional, great style. Were cheap, and there are 20,000 of them or something like this, and so it's easy to get them now. And there are some books, the number 313, which exist not more than 40, and means if you want to have all the books, you have to get this exemplar, and you have to pay something about $10,000, something like this.
For number 313. Yeah. What's the title of that one?
The Lyrics of Baroque. It's not a great book and not interesting, but however, it was destroyed during the war. And there are only those 20 or 30 exemplars given by the publisher to some friends. It's the so-called Blue Mauritius.
That's right. It's because it's so expensive and rare, right? This is the thing about it. Like, I love collecting all sorts of books. I collected the Britain in Pictures series. It's okay. That's doable. That's about 132. But this series, it's gigantic. It's kind of daunting when you look at the number. It's really difficult to think about completing your collection. So what you've done with your students is you've sort of divided the collection up by theme, and you made posters with your students. Perhaps you could tell me a bit about some of the different themes that you collected and pulled together.
Well, there are, for example, posters of the books of China, or books from Italy with Petrarca and Dante, and then you have Jewish books, of course, with very important authors, and there's a possibility to make books of medieval themes or of Reformation. One poster with ancient books of the Greek authors, philosophers.
Irish too, I think you showed me.
Yeah, and for example, about justice, about prison and lawyers, and there are 36 themes like this. There is a poster about sailing, mountains of Switzerland.
It's really only limited by your imagination. I suppose you could come up with all sorts of themes, right? In addition to what you've done.
Well, we could continue with it, but you need students, you need new ideas. Ideas there were enough. We could make 50 or 70 themes, and you always need 22 books to complete one poster, and it was a great fun.
Yeah, so what you did was you had these posters produced, and then you worked with the city of Leipzig and the retailers to present the posters and the actual books, I assume, in stores all in the center, correct?
Yeah, during the Leipzig book fair, there comes 80,000 people to look at books, and they are very glad to see that our town is filled with books. Northern Sea, where you could buy fish. And those books.
The fishmonger. You went into a fishmonger with those books. Yes, lovely.
And there were about 60 or 70 points with different themes according to the books.
Wow, that's super. So if I did want to collect these books, I'm not going to get 1,500, but I might be able to pick an area that I'm interested in and just get those books, I suppose.
Well, for example, there were some Chinese students who loved our poster about books from China, and when they finished their study, they bought all those Chinese books because they were full of pictures about the goldfishes, and they took them back home to China. Maybe they are reproduced there. I don't know.
Yes, that brings up a question I have. I mentioned to you that this great American book designer, Jerry Kelly, is very interested in incel books. And he said to me, he knows so much about printing, and he said to me that the book that you just referenced, the one on goldfish, he said that the printing in that book is absolutely superb.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what other books in this series have got superb printing like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you should have a look to the books made by Fritz Kredel. Fritz Kredel is famous enough in the United States, I suppose. He made, for example, something for President Kennedy. However, Fritz Kredel is famous enough in United States. He got prizes, and he made very nice books even in United States after his emigration.
Was he responsible for producing some of the incel books?
Books about mushrooms and with uniforms, and about 10 or 20 of those books, very nice and very fine books. But however, you should see the finest books from an aesthetic point of view normally are those that were exchanged during the 30s, former Jewish authors, and when they were destroyed and taken off of the Insel Bucherei, they made new books instead of for these numbers, and it's not a great history. And you can learn very much about German history with this, but however, it is not so difficult to find them.
Sorry, I don't understand. I understand that Jewish authors' books were destroyed and they were forbidden to be printed again. But you just said something about the aesthetically beautiful books. What are you talking about?
Well, it was just by chance. The finest books were made in the 30s.
Okay. And what were they?
They were colored, and they had themes like, as you said, the goldfish, or of mushrooms, very dangerous book. And
yes, you told me that story. Maybe you could just share that with me again. What happened?
Well, there was one mushroom.
Mushroom?
Called the Green Death. If you eat it, you will die. It's quite sure. Maybe you can get in your liver and you have a chance. But however, they made 40,000 copies with the wrong picture. It is probably the most dangerous book in German history.
Because people read it and thought they could eat the poisonous one, and how many people died?
We don't know, but probably hundreds.
And I suppose someone noticed it and they quickly pulped them and reprinted.
Yeah.
So there's the goldfish, there's the mushrooms. What else in the 30s? What else is beautifully printed?
Sibylle Merian, a Tropenbuch.
What's that?
It's about orchids of the 7th century, pictures, and made in a very impressive way. And then there are books about shells, very nice technique.
What else?
I think it's not more than 10 or 12 of those books, and you will find them easily. I will help you.
Well, I'll put a list of them for the listeners.
Yeah, we can make a small list.
Okay, super. Okay.
The thing is, nowadays it's not too difficult to get all those books. If you you can buy and find it internet. It's no problem. You seek a special number and you will get it. You will get
yes, except for 313.
Yeah, let's say 40 years ago, it was more or less impossible to get them all. It was nearly impossible to know what books existed. In Eastern Germany, it was completely impossible till 1969, and because the catalog made in Western Germany was forbidden. And we know one person who went to his library and took this catalog and made a copy of it by hand. 600 pages, interesting work. And then he could start to get them all, but however, it was not too easy.
Well, there is a big bibliography. When was that? 2-volume. When was that printed?
20 years old, something like 20 years old. Catalog of Mr. Jenne with pictures and numbers. And well, you see, there are two ways of sampling those books. You want to have every number one time, but if you have a book like this, number one of Rilke, there are 123 editions of it. And the books from 1921 look not like the books of 1964. You have small differences and they are described there. And if you want to have them all, you need much room. You will have to take not 1,900 books, but 20,000 or something like this.
Okay. Yeah, they're cheap too. Well, a lot of them are. I was at this huge flea market in Leipzig, and they were selling for €2.50 each.
Yeah, those books exist. They are sometimes very cheap enough, but however, there are books of $100, $500, and $700 if you want to have Rilke in its first edition.
Yeah,
it's very expensive. Books in leather and so on and so on.
one of the things that's so interesting is, yeah, you've referenced it, is that this series has survived all sorts of economic and political change, 2 world wars, hyperinflation, the Nazi dictatorship, division of Germany. I assume that just by looking at the publishing history, you can learn a lot about Germany.
Yeah, it's true. It's completely true. And you should know, in Eastern Germany, the books were very cheap, 20,000, one Ostmark and 20 or something like this. It never changed. Every book did cost more or less as much as a car, 20,000 D-marks. And they made those books because the owners came from Switzerland, and they had to make a closed conto, and they did not want the capitalists to earn money. And that's why they paid so much money to produce those books, to take the money from the owners in Switzerland. That's why they were so cheap in Eastern Germany.
Don't quite understand. They made so many because that would flood the market and capitalists couldn't earn money off them because there's so many available. Is that it?
You could not earn money with this in Eastern Germany because if you have a fixed price of 1 D-mark and 20, and you have the costs of, let's say, 2 mark, it will cost you very much to produce it. But it was not important to them because the owners came from Switzerland. They earned the money with the hardcovers, and the money they earned with hardcovers they used to make Insel Bucherei. That's why there are so many and cheap books in Eastern Germany. However, when they were produced and sold, they sold out 2 days later, and the antiquaries had bought 2,000 or 3,000 of them and sold them to a higher price. And there was a black market of them in GDR.
Different books were being produced then in Western Germany.
Well, sometimes they were the same books with another cover with the same text. and they were printed in Lipsia and were sent from here to Western Germany because it was cheaper to produce them here. Sometimes they were close friends and worked together, and sometimes they were enemies and made and started fight. Western publishing house was in Wiesbaden and Frankfurt, and the Eastern publishing house Insel was in Lipsia. And when they started to fight, they made a concurrence with the numbers. Means the number 1,000 in very important. What book is the number 1,000? In Eastern Germany was about socialist paintings of Soviet Russia. And in Western Germany, it was about Goethe, the lyrics of Goethe. They made this concurrence with more than 100 books. You can see it if you study the catalog. You will find 2 different books with the same number.
The catalog, can you buy a copy of that easily or not?
Yeah, you can buy them all. And I don't think there's a problem. Of course, you will not get the number 313.
Right. But I mean, can you get the bibliography, the one that's got all the color? How much does that cost?
Well, it's of Mr. Jenne, the catalog of Mr. Jenne, and he was a very rich enough man, and he had time, and he visited more than 5,000 booksellers to find all those books, and maybe there are some that they did forget. And if you want to be interesting for others to sell your books, you will write, you can't find this book in the catalog of Jenne, and then that means we did find a new book that is unknown till nowadays.
Jenner is Yenner?
Yeah.
You can find that online or not?
No, you can't.
Yeah.
And here you have, it's useful enough for anyone. And
what is that one?
This is the biography of Herbert Kästner. He doesn't like the other one because you need it only if you want to have all 125 exemplars of Rilke and all the 10,000 books that you need. However, we made a film, and you can, in our Buvision from 2022, find a film about the library, the greatest Insel library of world, where you can see the books of Jenne. They are now books of Jon Baumhauer, and it's incredible. And you will have to show, without German text, you will find it in our Buvision, and it will be a great thing to see.
There's a film about Baumhauer's library.
Yeah.
It used to be Jenner's?
Yeah.
And is that on YouTube or not?
No, you will have the link and can see it. It's no problem, and it's free. We made it.
The mother lode.
Yeah.
This is where the best collection is.
Yeah, and I think it would be a good idea to translate some pages of our Buvision. And it should not be so difficult and would be interesting enough. You could do it very well.
And what is Baumhauer? He bought Jenner's collection? Is that it?
Yeah, and many other collections. He has about 60,000 Insel books or something like this.
Where is he?
In Munich.
And he's a renowned collector.
Yeah. Well, now his son is going on with it, and he is even a scientist. For example, he has not only the normal books, but books with special history, with the inscriptions of uses for First World War, Second World War, and it's incredible great.
Okay. In the 1920s, Kippenberg's nephew, Christian Wagner, who's the founder of Albatross,
yeah,
he sort of took over. And at that point, they replaced, in the mid-20s, they replaced staples with thread stitching in the books, apparently.
They were produced in a new way. For example, at the start and in GDR, the title was handmade, and it was very expensive to put it in. In Eastern Germany, it was the work of so-called Hausfrauenbrigaden, of women that made it. And if there was something like a wind and a blow, it was everything away. This is paper too. And it was a great confusion when the wind came and you had to close the windows and so on. It was a very hard job. Nowadays, it's made in another way. It's not so great, but it's a part of the charm.
Were the Eastern German books better made than the Western books? Western German books?
In a more traditional way, they were made, and there were artists in our high school for graphics and book arts. The students, every student who finished his study had to make one Insel book. It was something like his masterpiece.
Where's the list of those?
It's very hard to find. A work I don't want to do now, but there are about 80 or 90 books of those persons, and means it's a great level of making books, and you couldn't have it in Western Germany.
The first color came in 1933.
Yeah.
The publishing house, and I think maybe one of the warehouses was in Leipzig, was destroyed by Allied bombing in 1943.
Yeah, 4th December. The whole book center was destroyed. However, right. I think the books that were destroyed, it was better for us that they do not exist any longer.
What does that mean?
National Socialist books, and it was terrible, but however, it was during the war, and the most of those books were forbidden in 1945 in any case.
I don't understand.
We shouldn't speak about this here. It's a great theme, you know it. With the lists of forbidden books and the book burning, and millions of books were destroyed in 1944, and our city as a book town was killed. And there were only 3 or 4 places left where you could print. And if you visited Lipsia let's say in 1920, you could find 2,000 libraries, printing houses, publishers, fabrics, where they produced paper and so on and so on, more than 2,000. And it was another culture here, with books destroyed forever.
This was by the Allied bombing in 43.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrible. I don't understand, though. You said that it was good that these books were destroyed? What do you mean?
It's a form of black humor, if I say it. You don't know, everything was destroyed, but the most of books produced in this year, of course, served in any way the war. It's a National Socialist ideology.
Okay, so we'll just back up a second then. Insel worked with the Nazis to produce a bunch of books?
No, you can't say so. There were 3 or 8 books you would not like today, but they were not so important. There are other publishing houses with other books, with National Socialist books. Kippenberg, let's say, was a conservative man, Of course, he would have liked to win the First World War. I don't believe that he would have liked to win the second one, because the most intellectual peoples in Germany hated the National Socialists. It was a tragedy for them that to defend their country, they had to defend the National Socialist Party. That's quite clear that Kippenberg, a man who loves Goethe, cannot be a National Socialist.
But they did produce 7 or 8 books that they were forced to do that?
No, it's a question of what can you sell, what is the market, and however, many people did like to find an alternative to the current ideology, reading Insel books, and to find something of the old bourgeois culture that normally was destroyed more or less. Of course, what they had to do were to destroy the Jewish books. They were cut out of the program. And Stefan Zweig is just the most famous. But there are something 20 or 50 books. However, it's not like there were other publishing houses with the most burnt authors. For example, Fischer Verlag, S. Fischer Verlag with Thomas Mann and Hermann Hesse and 10 famous Jewish authors. So most of them, the books were burned. And another famous house was Kiepenheuer with Bertolt Brecht and Anna Seghers and Heinrich Mann. And the most books of them were destroyed, and publishers went to the Netherlands to continue, or to Switzerland. After 1933, there were, I think, Malik Verlag, of course, the communist publishing house, Heinrich Heine. You could not publish Heinrich Heine in the Third Reich. It's quite clear, and they did not make very much books with him.
Okay. So the Nazis basically said, you can't publish these authors, and so they replaced them with what?
Well, we call it the Blut and Boden poetry.
Yes, Blood and Soil, yeah.
Interesting enough, 2 days ago I was reading poems, ballads of von Münchhausen, and very bloody scenes, and another form of literature. Or there was an author, his name was Hans Grimm, and the book was called Volk ohne Raum. Roomless people, or something like. Hundreds of thousands was sold of him. However, the people didn't like those books. So most people, bourgeois readers, did not like those books. However, in the year 1940, when the war started, the most other things you could not buy any longer without Marken. And that's why everyone wanted to have books. And books were sent to the front, to the soldiers, small books. Insel books were good to send to the front because they have hard covers. At the beginning of the war, there was a great business in those years between, well, let's say it started from 1940 until 1942, 1943, but then the bombing started and the business was over. Those were the best in the history of German book market ever.
From 40 to 43?
A great possibility to earn very much money selling books. And you should know that people like Joseph Goebbels had the idea that one should not produce the National Socialist literature, but classical books that everyone wanted to read, to it was better for the moral of people during the war to get good books.
That's interesting. He didn't shove any kind of doctrine down their throats, but again, it was part of this blood and soil.
Yeah,
It was pushing the Aryan roots then.
yeah.
Okay. And they made a lot of money selling these blood and soil books. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, enough. But they could sell every book in those years.
Because people had lots of time on their hands and they had to do something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just your take on the relationship between Goebbels and who was running the company at that point? Who was it?
It was still Kippenberg.
Even though Christian Wagner was involved, or he left?
No, he left. He went to Albatross, I think, in 32.
So Kippenberg was still running it in 40 to 43.
He was there till 1950. Everything was destroyed, and well, nice information for you. In the year 1945, the Insel publishing house was in the same house like we with our Bibliothek. There's a tower on the front side of the house. You have seen it, and in this tower was 1945 the Insel publishing house. So we are at the right place.
Okay.
The normal publishing house was completely destroyed. And it's very interesting, in the year 1945, the liberation of Lipsia in May was made by the US Army, not the Russian Army. And there was the famous Major Waples, who organized the book policy in post-war Germany. When they saw that the Russian would came, he said to famous publishing houses like Reklam, Breitkopf and Hertel, and he even asked Insel and Brockhaus, come with me to Wiesbaden, to Western Germany. They got the cars and they took their paper and everything. And there was, at those times, the National Library was in Lipsia, die Deutsche Bücherei, and they built another one in Western Germany. The organization of booksellers, the so-called Börsenverein, had been in Lipsia too, and they put it to Western Germany. So we had two organizations, the Börsenverein of Frankfurt, Main, and the Börsenverein of Lipsia, and they were divided until 1990. And there were two national libraries in Frankfurt and in Lipsia. And Kippenberg lived in Marburg during the last years, and was
where the library is.
Yeah, and he left France of his with the job to continue the library, the Insel publishing house in Lipsia, but they made another one in Wiesbaden. Well, they were more or less friends, old colleagues in both houses, but in the year 1961, Wiesbaden said we are not longer a part of the house in Lipsia, but we are the center. And
well, they were free, supposedly.
Yeah.
They were free to publish what they wanted, right?
Yeah, that was the point. And since this year, of course, there were some years where they stopped printing together and so on, and it took 2 or 3 other years because it was a great business for Eastern Germany to print books and sell them to Western Germany.
So they made them cheap.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there were many books that could only be printed in Western Germany because they could work together with the printing houses in Leipzig. It was much cheaper.
Which is in Eastern Germany.
Yeah, and in Eastern Germany, they had not hard money, no Western money. And so they were glad to, if they wanted to pay books or something, license, if they could pay it in a practical way by printing books for the Western book sellers. That was the normal deal.
But they just reprinted older titles and they were not allowed to print a certain number of them, right?
A nice question. Well, a very hard case and interesting case was when they started to print for Sweden pornograph newspapers. They had good quality and could make it, but of course it was a secret. And people in Eastern Germany should not know in which way they were earning money with making pornographic literature. There's one famous book of Inge von Wangenheim about a train with those newspapers with naked women and so on. And there was an incident and everyone could go and find those books transported by train. In Eastern Germany, there was the accident.
What do you mean accident? The train crashed?
Yeah, train crash.
And they found out that the East German printers were printing pornography and sending it to Sweden.
Yeah.
It's a little bit away from Insel, though.
Yeah, you can
so
say.
There's no pornography in the Insel series, is there?
Well, when Kippenberg came to the publishing house in 1990, he said it was something, he said, Augias Stahl, because they had started to make pornography because, well, it was easy to sell. However, it were books of Boccaccio de Camerone.
Yeah. So pornography didn't go into Insel then.
Right.
Just some of the more bawdy texts.
Kippenberg stopped it. He didn't like it.
I'm just going to mention the typography again, superb. And Rudolf Koch and Hermann Zapp were both involved in some of the typography. Is that correct?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. Apparently they were. Okay. So let's wrap up with why is this series so important? Why does it matter?
Well, it is one of the greatest series. I think every book looks in another way. It is made in an interesting aesthetic way. Well, you can see the German history. To me, it's interesting because you can see, if you see those books, periods of German history, you can smell the war, feel the division of our country and so on, and you will get very many informations about our strange and bloody history if you read those books, and you get information about how they were produced and how they were sold.
Okay, so how can listeners get more information about the series? What's the best way for someone who's listening to get more information? Because I've tried to get information on it. There's a really good Wikipedia page, but there's not a whole hell of a lot available in English online.
Yeah, it seems to be German theme at the moment, and probably it's it's worth traducing. You see, the books were copied in Israel too. I had a friend who said, well, those books, they look like the books we have in Israel nowadays. It's incredible. You kill us, and then we have nothing better to do than to copy your books. And
well, the King Penguins
Yeah,
They copied.
yeah, there's a strong influence, of course.
How can people get more information? They just can't.
I know how you can get information in German speak, of course. And as you hear, I'm not the one who should translate those books.
You've done a fabulous job, really. You have.
But now you can start and find and write and talk about those Insel books, and I would say it's interesting enough for you. Of course, you could say, well, it's those cultures, German culture, who is still reading in German language. But if you see that the great publishing houses in USA, Random House, or if you have Maxwell's by Holzbrink, are made by German publishing houses. It is an interesting question for you. What are those publishing houses? What is their history? And why are they so big that they could buy our publishing houses in the States? And then you would see that they started to earn their money in during Third Reich, and then it will start to get an interesting theme even for you, the German book history. Don't forget the role of the Jewish immigrants. How many our best publishers went to States, and I think there are many great publishing houses. If you take Good Wolf, and if you take other publishing houses of the universities and so on, then you
in England particularly too.
Yeah, you will feel this influence, and I think this is the point where the German book history gets very interesting, even for you, and it's worthwhile studying. Not only the Albatross books, because they were written in English, and they made those famous Elsewhere Forbidden books of James Joyce and so on. It would really be a great thing if we could work together in a better way. The problem is that those studies of German book history stop a little bit with my generation.
Well, I want to talk to you again about that, because your remark about the German publishers having huge amounts of money is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps we can talk again soon.
Yeah,
because you're working on the history of Fischer, correct?
Mm-hmm. Of Berman Fischer and the Samuel Fischer publishing house, and it was, I think, the publishing house with the most famous authors worldwide.
Thank you, Siegfried. Let me just sign off by saying that you are a professor of book studies, and you do research and publish on the history of German books, book selling, and publishing in the 20th century. Thank you so much for talking with me about Insel Bucherei.
Very glad to. Thank you.
Me too.